pride upon all Spartans, white and black equally. I want you to hear the generosity of that sentence. The life of Mrs. Mary Honor Wright reflects dignity and service and pride upon all Spartans, white and black, equally. Even if the requirements of improving the street make it necessary that the house be moved back from the street, the structure should not be razed. This house could become a museum for black artifacts and a repository of black culture, a place of pride and dignity for our city. The house did not survive. All month we are listening to the voices of this neighborhood, and particularly the voices of black female leaders in this neighborhood who've been so crucial to the development of our entire community. We share the plate this month on behalf of the International Women's Convocation, a UU movement to support women leaders in grassroots community movements all around the world. I want to invite Mary Miles, who's worked closely with this project for many years, to share with us again about the IWC.
Thank you, Scott. And thank you, Mel. You're always such a hard act to follow. As is Scott, but anyway. I'm back. I was here last week and talked a little bit about a very favorite organization of mine. And actually today is International Women's Day, March the 8th, and I've heard several things already on NPR and other television stations about this. So it is being recognized. It's been designated by the United Nations as International Women's Day with the theme this year of Generation Equality, Realizing Women's Rights. And this, of course, highlights the imperative of building support for women's rights and for women's full participation in societies around the world. As I mentioned last Sunday, the International Women's Convocation, IWC, is a Unitarian Universalist nonprofit organization that has achieved special consultative service status with the United Nations Economic and Social Council. This is the highest status that can be bestowed on a non-governmental organization or an NGO. In collaboration with UUs and other progressive women of faith around the world, the IWC is at the forefront of efforts globally to empower all women and girls to help them achieve gender equality. The IWC works at the grassroots level and seeks to build capacity and achieve positive change in the local community. whether it's in Bolivia, the Philippines, Romania, India, Uganda, or wherever. The insert in your order of service focuses on 2 IWC program participants from very different parts of the world. And they tell in their own words how the IWC and the programs that they've participated in have been transformative, not only in their own lives, but for their communities. As Scott says, we're once again sharing the plate with the IWC. And offerings today will support programs that provide culturally sensitive leadership training, networking opportunities and resources, and sustainability by building capacity for the long run. Half of the designated money that you contribute this morning and all that you designate to share the plate will go to support this worthwhile organization which creates a global network for UU women and empowers them to transform their communities. Thank you for your generosity.
Let us begin with gratitude. I remember being a kid, coming down Union Street and turning onto Marion Avenue to cut across to junior high school. My dad was driving me to come to school in the South Side at Carver. That's where I did middle school. Some of you have heard me share this before at a community gathering here in the neighborhood, but allow me to share it again here with everyone. I remember, depending on how my dad would drive, either cutting over South Converse Street, or if he came in through the Duncan Park entrance and swung around the ball field, driving down South Converse Street before turning to go to school. Every morning, morning after morning, stressed out about exams, or happy they were over, or worrying how I was going to get my homework done in homeroom. Whatever was going through my brain, crossing South Converse Street. And particularly in the spring, just this time of year, I loved it. I loved that turn in the road and that part of the drive, because every yard, lawn after lawn, house after house, along South Converse Street was a garden. Gardens in the front yard of people's homes. Green and floral, flowering everywhere, from hanging baskets on the porches, potted plants on the stoops, plantings in the beds, even sometimes in the front yards themselves. Such a green and verdant place. And I could feel my mind ease. I can still remember the feeling as a kid. What a pleasant, short trip that was to come down South Converse Street. And then I'd go to school. And school was school. But Carver was a really good school. There's no question that it was a garden for the mind. I remember my teachers and what they taught me. I remember specific lessons that they taught me in that place. And I remember how I grew from my elementary years into my high school years. What a terrible transition those middle school years are. We all remember what that evolution of our being is. And I was in the most excellent place. I remember being at parties and gatherings, church gatherings, from an unnamed church you can see out your windows. I can remember being outside of the school and its campus and hearing the most awful statements about my school. Carver had been the black high school during the time of segregation. And I was a white minority student there. And the perception of the school and the comments people felt free to make about it were as awful as you can imagine. We certainly don't need to name them. And they were wrong. That was a garden of the mind. And man, did I grow. Imagine my surprise years later when a little church on the south side called me and asked for me to come back to this neighborhood that I had known in my childhood and to join them in cultivating this garden of the soul that is UUCS. Never in my life did I think I would return to this place. And never in my wildest dreams did I think this neighborhood and the people in it would cause me to grow in ways I could not anticipate, reminding me of how I had grown in my adolescence and bringing me into an adulthood of work and meaning that I didn't know was available to me. I have so much to be grateful for in this place. And we do too. You know, this church previously was located in another Converse neighborhood, next to Converse College. That's where the first half of our life as a congregation took place. And it was a place of great richness, of intellectual and cultural ferment, a place of safety, where a gathering like this, of people who think like us, however you would even characterize that, all the different ways of thinking, could gather in peace and solidarity to grow together. And yet the congregation only grew past maybe 20 to 40 people. It never really got bigger than that. And one day, the folks on that location invited a U consultant to come in and just talk about what's our future? What do we need to do? How might we expand as a congregation? What might our future promise be? And the consultant said, and now I quote the Venerable Marion Tisdale, "How many parking spaces do you have?" And the answer was 3. And this high-powered, probably not high-dollar consultant leveled the most brilliant wisdom we could ask. People aren't going to come if there's no place for them to park. You need a new place. And in 1985, the building that is our fellowship hall now, but was our sanctuary then, in the RE wing opened as the new location of this church. Many of you were a part of bringing the church to this neighborhood. Someone was sitting in my office just this week. There's a project afoot. It's a great project. I'm so thankful for it. To develop a new version of our pictorial directory. Parentheses, Scott doesn't know how to recognize you and needs to know your names and your faces together. A directory where we can all look to see whose name goes with whose face so we can know each other better. It's a wonderful initiative. I'm so grateful for it. The person said, the last time we did this, there were 140 folks for us to work with, members and friends and peripheral members of our community, all of whom we want to include. Now we have to find more than 300 people. Something has happened here. And whatever else we may take those numbers to mean, they're an important symbol of all that this place has given us, of the life that this place has provided for us as a congregation, as individuals, as families and friends, and as a gathering, as a people. This place has given us so much. Let us begin with gratitude. South of Maine is a book that I want to encourage all of you to put your hands on and to open, to look at the pictures and to read the stories. It's a book of memory, and it's a book of pride. It tells the history of this neighborhood and of what happened here after the Civil War, all the way up until the decade before this church came to be here. To the time during the Great Society Project and the time of integration, when cities all over our country engaged what was called the Model Cities Program and urban renewal programs during the 1970s. Now, for many of us, that story is a very complex history. There are people in this congregation who were social workers in this community, helping folks figure out how to navigate urban renewal. And there are folks in this congregation who were part of the decisions and fundraising to purchase land in the decade after urban renewal. My alma mater for Women's History Month, the mother of my soul, my alma mater, is the integrated Carver Junior High School, which from a white progressive perspective is fantastic, but from other perspectives is a mixed history with much loss during the time of integration. We live a complicated history. But fundamentally, this neighborhood and its people and its history, far greater than our own, have shaped us, and we owe much to this place. In the complexity and the ambiguity of our experience and of our feelings, of our continually opening and evolving consciousness, the evolution of our awareness. Let us begin with gratitude. The posture that we take as we navigate this history and these questions and our own future here, the posture that we take matters a great deal. The story told in South of Maine is a mixed story. It has both good and bad in it. Part of what's so powerful about the book is to hear leaders from this community who saw the process of urban renewal take place parse what worked and what didn't. It's not a one-sided story, even from the perspective of folks in this neighborhood. And it's worth listening to that dialogue, that disagreement, and that thinking so that we understand the ambiguity and complexity in which we find ourselves. Now, there's no doubt it is also a story of broken promises, of broken trust, and of the grief that came from that. And we should be aware, if only from the trajectory of the book itself, from Reconstruction into the 20th century, that story of broken promises and broken trust and grief is a repeated one, not a new one. But above all, this book is a story of memory and about not allowing what was lost to cause a loss of pride and dignity in the power and the beauty of this green and thriving place. The letter of Hudson L. Barksdale, advocating for the preservation of Mary H. Wright's house, is a preeminent example of this. His argument is a losing argument. But what he says is of critical importance. He speaks about dignity and pride, about what that house means to this neighborhood, but also to our whole city. And that is a pride that by no means should be pitied. And it is certainly not a pride that we should patronize. Consider where the pride voiced in his letter comes from. From Reconstruction to urban renewal. Think of all that was built by the people of this neighborhood. The houses, the schools, the businesses, the civic institutions, the churches and the clubs, the places of leisure and recreation. Think of all that was built, and think of the pressure and the injustice, the circumstances in which it was built. As his letter indicates, there is enormous pride in what this community has created over more than a century, over decades and decades and decades. A pride that is life-giving and that can generate life for every person in this neighborhood and for our entire community. His claim is very big, and it is for us all. We've entered into this social justice process. In January, we looked at projects around immigration. In February, we talked about doing the internal work of thinking about racism, about our own work as a congregation to reckon with the legacy of racism, and then engaging with anti-racist organizations in our community to support their work, and translating that work into the work of voting justice, considering seriously the effects of gerrymandering and voter suppression, and if we claim to be a democracy and an institution that values democracy, how to advocate for a truly just democratic process for every person in our community. And now in March, we're thinking about projects regarding just being a neighbor. the possibility of hosting meals in this place to simply know our neighbors, and doing the internal work so that if we were to invite them here, we wouldn't do it with incorrect, patronizing mentality, but instead with mutuality, with a real sense of shared space and looking for shared goals, to be a neighbor, and to engage in environmental action. The simple work of picking up trash and documenting it in this community so that downstream it doesn't pollute our entire state and our oceans and our globe. In my opinion, of all the projects that we've looked at, and we've talked about some big and some daring stuff, in my opinion, the projects for this month are the most challenging of all that we could choose. That's not to tell you what to vote for come our annual meeting in June. Democracy is one of our greatest values. But there's something about these projects that I want to just draw your attention to. Part of the challenge that these last two projects offer us is that they ask us to do something more than traditional forms of service. These last two projects are about more than just helping where there is need. These last two projects go beyond the usual concepts of social justice and community action. They're not only about facing or addressing problems. There's something more positive and more difficult about them. The work of connecting with our neighbors and the work of being stewards of our immediate environment. Those are projects that are about connecting with people and traditions and history and beauty and the life energy of this place. It's more than helpfulness. This is thinking of social justice as an act of community and fellowship and gratitude. These projects ask us to slow down and to reckon with what it means to be here, right here, and with what being a part of the ecology of this neighborhood means. Look at us all here. Look around this room. This neighborhood has created a place for us all. Feel yourself in this place. Smell the air. Feel the pride that fills this environment. This place has given us so much. One of the ways that we arrived at these as potential projects as a social justice council is through the act, every couple of months, of joining with the South Converse Neighborhood Association to just pick up litter. Just to show up on a Saturday morning and pick up litter. It's such a simple but profound act, an act of service leadership and an act of love. And it matters so much in what spirit it is done. Rick Honenberg and Ruth Stanton and Fred Stoll and Pam Stoll and Joyce Harrison and a lot of other people have gotten up on cold mornings and wet mornings and god-awful humid mornings, dew-soaked tennis shoes, sticky gloves, trying to pick up garbage, joining in acts of service in this neighborhood, joining to clean, leading our congregation in how to be a neighbor in this place. And that small link has built relationships and attendance at neighborhood association meetings and events in this place by the neighborhood association and dreaming and collaboration about further things that might be done. A whole expansion of possibility just out of showing up to tidy the environment around us. And people like Harold Hatcher and Bob Mitchell spent many Sunday mornings before us doing exactly the same thing for decades. But when these people clean up our space, they're doing more than just picking up garbage. And the spirit in which they do it matters. I've spoken with them about it, and they're very careful about this. They understand that they're not fixing a problem. They're joining in pride. They're joining in pride and love for this place. Pride to take care of what is beautiful and life-giving here, and what has been beautiful and life-giving for a long, long time. This neighborhood is not a place that needs our fixing. This neighborhood is a place that has given life and been life-generating since before the Civil War and through the time of Reconstruction, through the era of Jim Crow and segregation, through the rocky path of integration and model cities and urban renewal, down to today. With the coming of this church and our entry into the 21st century, and the questions that we ask as a congregation about what our future will be, this neighborhood has given life. This neighborhood is a garden. And we have grown here, you and I. It has given us so much. Imagine what more might grow in us and around us and in relationship with our neighbors, in the light and the beauty and the ecology of this place, and the love and the pride and the dignity of a neighborhood that has given so much to this city for so long. Imagine what more life there is to grow here. And so let us stand in this neighborhood, in this place where we have been welcomed and where we have grown, to sing together with hearts of gratitude.
If you would turn to page 163 in your gray hymnals, please, For the Earth Forever Turning. For the earth forever turning, for the skies for every sea, for our lives, for all we cherish, sing we our joyful song of peace. For the mountains, hills, and pastures in their silent majesty, for the stars, for all the heavens, sing we our joyful song of peace. For the sun, for rain and thunder, for the seasons' harmony, for our lives, for all creation,
praise to thee. For the world we raise our voices, for the home that gives us birth. In our joy we sing, returning home to our blue-green hills of earth. A Democratic Earth for All Its Creatures by Neil Shadle from Sacred Service in Civic Space, 300 Years of Community Ministry in Unitarian Universalism. There is a certain spirit which appears within and among us, in which we seek, in relationship, to enhance and enlarge the whole being and the whole community. Any organized effort to respond to this spirit, to say yes to it, to encourage it, to embody it in the structures and institutions of the world, is the ministry of the true church of democracy. It is committed to nothing but the deep purposes of a whole democratic earth for all its creatures.
Gratitude. Place